everyone, and welcome back to the Content Mix. I'm Carlota Pico, your host for today's show, and I'm excited to introduce Josh Moore, who is founder of Lawless Studio and also has over a decade of experience managing brand campaigns and partnerships in the publishing world, which he'll tell us more about soon. Welcome, Josh, and thank you so much for joining us today on the Content Mix.
Hey, Carlota, and hey, guys. Looking forward to talking about Lawless Studio and my career kind of to date. Follow me on LinkedIn, go to lawlessstudio.co.uk/agency to find out a bit more about what we do. But yeah, looking forward to talking a little bit more.
Definitely. So let's dive straight into it. Tell me a little bit about your background experience. How did you get to where you are today, Josh?
So I've had about 10, you really kindly kind of mentioned it at the start. I've had about 10 years of experience working in the world of publishing. So I started my career with Hearst. I was employed as a classified sales executive selling small credit card size ads in the back of Country Living magazine. And from there, I kind of bounced between magazines at Hearst, Men's Health, Good Housekeeping, etc. And then kind of carved out a career in the creative solutions part of the businesses kind of from there. So from there, I moved to Haymarket Publishing, where I worked at 442, which is an amazing football magazine. I'm a massive Chelsea fan, so being in the football environment was, it's not, Chelsea aren't for everyone, I know. It's not the best team on the planet. But working with a football magazine was fantastic. And then I got the opportunity to go over to ESI Media, who look after even standard and independent newspaper brands. So I moved from magazines to newspapers, again with that thread of creative solutions and partnerships, working on amazing campaigns for the likes of Sky and Amex and some huge brands, and afforded quite a lot of trust and responsibility on that. And I was there for a huge amount of time, and really learned so much from so many people. And then since then, I've moved to kind of other had threads of kind of male lifestyle titles. So GQ, I moved to Condé Nast to work across partnerships at GQ and Wired, which in itself was an amazing experience. Obviously, always read GQ throughout my whole life. So brilliant to be working on that brand. And then most recently worked at Hypebeast, which kind of sneaker footwear, social first brand. And recently I made the decision to set my own business up, the Lawless Studio, and harness all of that experience and all those kind of connections I've made over the years and all the connections I've made with brands over the years, to work for myself and set my own thing up, which is obviously quite daunting and interesting at the same time. But yeah, the time's right. I've got 10 years of experience in publishing, and now I'm kind of going out and then helping brands kind of realize activations through artists, which I'll obviously dive into in way more detail shortly.
Josh, such an exciting background. So I do want to pick your brain a little bit more on what it was like to work for such iconic and big powerhouse media brands like GQ, like Condé Nast, etc.
Yeah, no, of course. I guess you're right. They absolutely are powerhouses in their fields. And I guess the similarities between all of those are, Hearst, you have some of the biggest magazines in their kind of respective niches. They're the leading kind of circulating magazines in their fields. Evening Standard is the largest distributed paper in London and indeed the country. And GQ is the biggest male lifestyle magazine kind of in the UK and possibly in the world. So there's a kind of standard of expectancy in terms of content, and kind of every person employed into each of the departments has to kind of be at the top of their game. But there's kind of a real valuable layer of experience I've found at each of those kind of powerhouses. People in departments who have been there for 5, 10, 15 years, and they are the people that I've learnt the most from, for sure. Those people with so much experience who've seen, all the media firsts, every kind of campaign brief, every kind of front page you can kind of see, they've seen it all before. So there's been so much experience that I've kind of pulled from. So yeah, I guess the people have been the main elements of those powerhouse brands that I've kind of learnt from.
What about the culture? What was the culture like working for those major agencies?
So the culture, I guess I started my career in magazines where it's 2 or 3 days of kind of frenetic buzz of maybe almost like a circus before press day. Then the issue goes to press, and then there's a little bit of a lull, and you kind of a little bit of a chance to breathe. and then it all starts again. And especially with monthly magazines, it's so cyclical and you're kind of thinking so many months in advance. But it's a nice kind of routine, and it's really interesting to see how it dials up right before press day, and that whole buzz in the office, and then it calms, and then it all kind of builds up again, and it's kind of like that. But then I moved from magazines to papers, and then the paper is being published every single day. So the morning is frenetic in terms of getting that paper for the next day sorted. And then kind of by the end of the day, the phones are all still ringing up until about 5 o'clock, but then the paper has pretty much all gone to press. So it all stops, and then it all starts again, and it all stops, and it all starts again. So it's definitely, when I moved from magazines to papers, that frenetic buzz and that pace that you usually get around press day, that really small window at monthly magazines, that was happening every day. So yeah, a really interesting shift and a really interesting way. I had to really adapt and get used to that kind of daily cyclical thing. But I guess the daily cyclical thing is kind of more in tune with digital and social and the way that we're always on. So I guess it was a little bit more representative of how media is consumed and kind of delivered. But yeah, that was the most interesting shift, I think, between going from monthly magazines to a daily paper.
Okay, very interesting. So you've worked with a lot of iconic brands as well, like Adidas, Nike, Sky, and many more. Were you part of the sales process?
Yes, yeah. So in terms of all of my roles up until now, and including now, the sole responsibility of the sales process was led by me. So if I am, if I'm holding a role at GQ or Hypebeast or ESI, I was tasked with kind of developing impactful creative solutions for those brands, Adidas, Nike, Sky, etc. Starting off with the concept, coming up with that with the wider team, and then leading that process from then to sign off and staying close to the project through the delivery of assets, content, etc. post sale, and then staying close. But obviously there would be a project management team kind of coordinating that, and then coming back around at the end of the campaign life cycle and delivering post campaign reports. So essentially, I'm there from start to finish, and I am that person, that point person that Adidas, Nike, or Sky will hold accountable if the idea that I initially pitched doesn't deliver, or it goes wrong, or it's kind of off concept slightly. So yeah, everything in terms of the sales process it was kind of myself. It would lie with me, sort of thing.
Okay, so walk me through a pitch. What does a pitch look like for a major iconic brand like Nike? How do you pitch?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I am that point person. I'm that kind of responsible person for the sales, in the sales process with the client, and I have that relationship with the client, right? So I am really the key responsibility of the person in the pre-sale part of that process is to be as close to the client as possible, so that you understand their world and you understand their marketing objectives, and you're really close to kind of everything they have coming up in the year, so that because obviously you're having conversations about kind of collaborating and working together, and sometimes there's a brief straight away, but sometimes it's a little bit of a dance to kind of get there. So you have to be ready for when that brief lands. You know that they have something coming up. You know this is the pressure point in their business. You know about all of these things that they want to achieve, because even if they're not in the brief, you have to kind of know that from the conversations you've had with that brand. So in terms of the process, it's generally 80% of the time a brief will land. And a brief comes from Adidas or Nike. They have a certain thing they have coming up. They have a campaign they want to launch. They need you to create content or to come up with an idea. And it's sometimes really far down in the funnel where you have to start right at the start and come up with a huge concept. Or sometimes it's a really tight idea that they have and you just have to kind of create content for that specific idea. So it's 80% led by the brand in terms of their turnaround, their calendar, their marketing kind of rollout for the year. Sometimes 20% of the time it's a proactive that the media owner will take out. So that could be like a new editorial launch that some magazine at Hearst are starting to bring out that we think would be perfect for the Adidas brand, or a tentpole moment in the year. Euros, World Cup, something to do with Halloween, you name it, when you're dialed into kind of that, especially in the newspaper world, you anticipate those moments, the content is going to go around those moments. So you take that opportunity to the brand. So that's kind of basically 80% brief, 20% kind of proactive. And then you kind of work on the concept, and it's constant communication with the brand, the client, making sure the concept is correct tonally and kind of delivers all the deliverables. You deliver it, and then hopefully they sign it off, and then it moves to post sale. So then it moves to a project management team on both media owner side and kind of client side. But and that all varies how many people are involved. If there's intermediaries like media agencies or PR agencies or creative agencies, then it might the campaign might then move to another department. But it's always really important that the person who kind of sold that campaign to the brand is close to that campaign throughout that process, because there's so many instances where you hand work over to a producer or to kind of another team. And communication is always so key in that because interpretation, and so a producer takes kind of your deck and it's like, okay, this is signed off by Adidas. The producer might interpret it differently because they speak a little bit of a different language in their day-to-day. So you have to be close to everybody working on that campaign at every single point throughout the way. So communication is really key. And I think that the thing that I think that Adidas and Nike have in common, and to an extent Sky, is that this is all being done at breakneck speed. It's all being done really quickly. Adidas get a decision from above that this campaign has to go out next week, or it has to be shot in 2 weeks' time. So the turnarounds are ridiculous. We have to turn work around for them in super quick time. So it's about knowing that they value speed and having support structures and kind of, I guess, structures in place that enable you to work in an agile manner and get stuff through to them quickly. So it's about anticipating that and knowing which clients really value speed and need things turned around quickly. But yeah, the two main things in terms of success with that process, the post-sale or the pre-sale and post-sale process, is communication and anticipating how quick things need to be done.
Yeah, but surely you're not the only agency who's competing for a project from Nike or from any of the iconic brands. So
no. Yeah, I skirted over that bit a little bit. That pre-sale, post-sale is assuming the campaign happens, right? But there's so many instances where you're pitching for work and you're pitching against your competitors. So yeah, the percentage of work pitched versus work signed off varies between brands. Obviously, I'm lucky enough to have worked at places like GQ and Evening Standard, where a lot of the campaigns are going to happen because they're such kind of leaders in their field. But a lot of work is done in the pre-sale that doesn't then move to post-sale, and either that work goes to a competitor, competitive agency, competitive media owner, or it doesn't happen. Sometimes the client that pull the budget and they decide they can't go ahead with it, or it's just an idea and they don't want to go forward with it. So yeah, there's often instances where you're either competing and you don't win the work, or the budget gets pulled and it doesn't happen.
From a mental health point of view, how do you deal with that type of rejection when you put so much effort and work into a project that doesn't end up in your hands?
Yeah, it's tough. It is tough. You get resilient to it. It's a process. Brief lands, and you have to make sure that the brief response is always there. I think it's easier when you work with a client like Adidas, who have multiple projects going on through the year and therefore multiple briefs coming, and you get a kind of like a way of working with them, and you get used to communication, trust is built, and you understand what they do and don't like. But yeah, it's tough. There are so many times when you've put your heart and soul, and the whole teams have put their hearts and souls into work, which doesn't come off. And often it's those really exciting, amazing, big media first campaigns that you've kind of developed that won't happen. Or you get really, really, really close to sign off, and something happens where the client kind of loses, not trust, but something will happen where they can't sign it off, or it will go to a competitor last minute. I think having it happen so many times builds resilience. In terms of the mental health aspect, it is tough. It really is tough. But you have to just trust that for all the good work you put in, that will then come good at some point for either that client or someone else. So it's about understanding the process and just seeing it happen. I think it could easily knock you back when you first start out, but I think definitely trust the process. If you're good and the work you put in, which will always be top drawer, it will happen at some point down the line.
Okay, talking about things that unexpectedly happen, let's talk about COVID-19. How has COVID-19 disrupted your marketing plans?
Massively. Yeah, massively. When I was at Hypebeast, it really did disrupt the whole kind of cadence of the year, and looking at kind of brand calendars and their sort of output for the rest of this kind of calendar year. Stores closing for Adidas and Nike was a huge thing. That's where a huge amount of their revenue comes from. So they had to pivot as businesses to basically pull marketing spend. I think that's the long and short of it. Marketing budgets have dried up for sure this year. But now I think we're coming into an age where, well, not an age, but a kind of period of recovery marketing. Brands are starting to be warm to ideas and to maybe take risks towards the end of this year, with the view to 2021 being that big recovery boost year for their brands. It's I think when I'm speaking to brands, a lot of them are saying that they don't have the marketing budgets they used to. That was kind of going that way anyway. Brands had to be more nimble and agile with how they spent their marketing dollars. But COVID decimated some brands' marketing budgets. So brands are now looking for really clever ways to spend their marketing dollars, things that will really deliver maximum ROI, but for small kind of budgets. So it's about being wise to that and kind of fostering trust and saying, look, give us a go, especially with Lawless Studio. The solution we're trying to build is a really nimble, agile solution for brands that don't have huge budgets, but want to access great talent and want to access, platforms by Instagram, like Instagram and huge followings. That can be done on small budgets. It's just about getting the trust of the client and showing ways of doing that.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Lawless Studio, you launched a company in the middle of a global pandemic, which already takes a lot of courage. Nevertheless, just launching a company on its own is quite courageous as well. Could you talk to me about some of the competitive advantages that Lawless Studio offers when compared to other agencies?
So I mean, I guess for yourself and for the audience, it might help everybody for me to kind of explain what a Lawless Studio is, right? Before to kind of, because it sounds quite a cool kind of concept, but you guys might not understand kind of what it fully is. So I guess the 30-second elevator pitch or whatever, it's Lawless Studio is a trend conscious creative and production service that offers brands artist-led creative solutions to level up brand projects. So what that means in English is we have an incredible roster of artistic talent, right? With a specific skew to tattoo and graffiti artists. We connect those artists to brands and projects when a particular kind of artistic style is needed. So it could be really granular, like an event, they need 3 tattooists because the campaign is all kind of sorted and they have this marketing stunt and they need tattooists to kind of level up this campaign. So it could be a really specific solution where we provide the artistic talent, or it could be just that a brand wants to add personality to a launch and they kind of have a loose idea around a mural in Shoreditch, but they kind of need help with the concept and kind of driving that forward. So we know that brands are kind of thirsty for that culture, but it can be a fine balance in getting that done in a right and authentic way is quite a tricky kind of thing to do. So our thing and our point of difference is that our ideas and solutions are artist led. So the artists guide the brief response, they guide the idea, and it allows that brand to tap into that culture in a really credible way. But the next kind of thing that I guess sets us apart, because there are some companies that connect brands to artists in that way, shape or form, but they're very much production led and they're a production capacity for brands. But our point of difference is we also offer a distribution method. So we kind of connect brands to the audiences of each artist through Instagram and their other social channels. So we use their social touch point as a distribution point to kind of close that loop and make our offering almost like a turnkey solution for a brand looking to tap into visual culture, if that makes sense. So I guess we're essentially part content creation service, part niche influencer agency. Okay. If you were to sum it up.
Absolutely, I understand. So why did you leave the comfort or the security blanket of major media powerhouses to venture into the world of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I mean, a good question. I mean, the whole world right now is so uncertain, so why not add more uncertainty to it? I think COVID, the way we all work from home now, or the way we've had to pivot to working from home, has been really, I think, important. And it's been a bit of a lesson in what, and it's actually allowed us to think about values and motivations and what we kind of find important. I mean, Lawless Studio itself has been an idea that's been in my head for 2 years. I went traveling 2.5 years or so ago, and kind of when I came back from there, I was like, right, I'm going to launch Lawless Studio. I'd had this idea kind of percolating for a while, and I was like, this is the time to launch it. But I'm so glad I didn't launch it then, because working at GQ and working at Hypebeast, working with artistic talent on video-led projects within those 2 years has allowed me, I've learned a lot from being in both those roles. So I needed a few more years of actually kind of, working with influencers and talent, just to learn those skills and to figure out kind of how to take that forward. So, I guess COVID has given me the opportunity to figure things out a little bit and give me that impetus and that opportunity to kind of do it. And now I've launched it. The reaction to what we're doing has been so overwhelming and so supportive. I've been able to, I've got so much conviction, belief that it itself will work. And I've kind of had that opportunity now over the last 3 or 4 weeks to stress test Lawless Studio as a proposition with some of my best contacts who are huge players in the industry. So everyone's been overwhelmingly supportive, and kind of what I harked back to a moment ago. Brands are looking for those nimble solutions, and every time I speak to a brand, they're like, look, we're looking for a nimble kind of budget-friendly solution. So the more I speak to brands, the more I speak to my contacts, the more I'm validated in that I'm doing the right thing. And I think also now I'm starting to do it. And I'm starting to kind of live that life of entrepreneurship. Is that the word? There's a certain satisfaction to it. It's kind of self-fulfilling and self-driving. I'm working more hours than I ever have done when working in established roles at brands. But at the same time, it almost doesn't feel like work, if that makes sense. It definitely is work, but it's so self-motivating and so self-driving, and there's so much momentum through kind of what I'm doing. That sometimes it doesn't feel like work. I don't kind of notice it as work. It's something I'm so passionate about. But yeah, you're right. There is risk and uncertainty, and that's something I think about a lot, for sure. And everyone does, I think, at the minute. But yeah, the Lawless Studio has so much momentum, and it's evolving so much so quickly, that for now it's just an amazing feeling, and it's just driving me forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. And you mentioned at the beginning of this interview that you started off in advertisement and now have moved into partnerships. What's the difference?
I guess advertising, the way I would kind of translate it, is that advertising is, I guess, your traditional display advertising when a brand employs a creative agency. They come up with a kind of visual look and feel of an actual advert, which would slot into not the olden days, but maybe 10 years ago when I worked at Men's Health, I was tasked with selling digital display ads, which were the leaderboards and the MPUs on Men's Health. That's paid advertising. And, the front page spreads, double page spread in front of GQ, that's paid advertising. A brand sends you their creative, their copy, kind of whatever language you want to use, and you run it. Partnerships is different in that there's more dialogue in the start of the chain, and there's a brief from a client, and then you come up with a creative solution that kind of ticks all the boxes of the brief, delivers against their KPIs, a solution that works against the stress points of their business, but it does it in a way that kind of it's more connected to the audience of that product. So it's written in the language of, I guess, an advertorial, as we were kind of saying earlier, it's written in the language of someone who writes content for the Evening Standard, and it's in partnership with X brand.
Okay.
So it's created by the media owner.
Okay, excellent. Well, you set up the stage for my next question. So considering your experience working with influencers, how much creative freedom should brands give to their influencers?
A lot. Yeah, a lot. I mean, if I'm looking at taking a brief from a client right now and putting that to my artists, I would want to give the artist as much creative freedom as possible, because that drives authenticity and that makes it credible, especially in the age of social influencer marketing, when I think that language and that world of kind of in partnership with is so prevalent, and people are used to it now in a way that they weren't however many years ago. So it's normal for someone to log onto Instagram and see in partnership with, and that's kind of the world they're used to now. But it has to be led by the artists. Consumers are more savvy than ever. They're more tech savvy than ever. They're more kind of digitally in tune than ever. So I think they will be able to sniff something wrong and tell when it's inauthentic and not credible. So that's our kind of point of difference is we make sure that when we get a brief, the solutions are artist-led. They're not. I mean, I obviously oversee all the solutions and I come at the solutions with a commercial lens to ensure that they sing, right for the brand, but they have to be artist-led. Otherwise, when they go out on the artist channels, it doesn't chime with the rest of the artist feed and it doesn't kind of look right. And almost that whole reason that you were briefed in the first place falls apart.
Okay, so then why go through an agency to do that? Can't a brand just tap into the influencer themselves? Wouldn't the agency add extra costs?
Yes and no. What we do is we offer multiple artists with different skill sets, I think, and also it's a labor cost. I think a brand could spend a lot of time sourcing the right artist, but I look at kind of sourcing talent as my chief role, and I know the kind of nuances and the differences between each of the artistic skill sets. So one of my artists is really adept at kind of illustration and can do some really cool AR stuff, but then one of the artists is a bit more, I guess, experiential led and can do amazing stuff on a wall or a mural. And these differences in artistic talent are really important to kind of tap into. It adds a layer of strategy to using tattoo or graffiti artists in the first place and tapping into visual art and visual culture for the benefit of your brand campaign. There has to be strategy employed, because if you're just using tattoo and graffiti as a stamp of cool on your project, then it will probably get sniffed out quite quickly as being false. But if it's artist led and it's really in tune with the artist's kind of specific style and skill set, then that's when amazing things can happen. And that's when it elevates it above just a stamp of cool, and it elevates it to real credible collaboration between brand and artist.
Okay, Josh, very interesting, which actually leads me into my next question. Do you have any marketing hacks for brands that are on a low budget?
I'm not sure if it's a hack as such, but I harness the reach and voice of influencers and look for a specific niche to own, not just graffiti or tattoo, because that's self-serving to my kind of offering, but look to a niche to own, gain credibility in that niche by working with the best talent in that niche. And that can be done on low budgets, for sure. I guess another hack also, which I'm kind of learning about quite a lot at the minute, is visual identity. And again, this is a low budget thing. Logos, brand colors, fonts, they play such a part in contributing to visual identity, and that makes content stand out. So if you're using older content or refreshing or repurposing content for your own channel, get that visual identity right. And for each platform, refine it for each platform. So LinkedIn's going to be slightly different for Instagram, obviously. But yeah, that's low budget. You don't have to kind of invest in huge teams or kind of huge solutions to do that. It's getting that kind of visual identity right. And I guess then the next thing is speed and timing. So get the speed right. If there's newsworthiness to the content, get it out quick. This is something I learned at Hypebeast. Get that content out before anyone else. But there's a caveat. Do it at the right time. If the newsworthiness of the content lands on your kind of on your phone, as it probably does now, and you think, great, I'm going to post that, and it's Friday afternoon, don't post it. Maybe if it comes out on Saturday afternoon, probably don't post it. Wait to the opportune moment. So speed is really, really important, getting that kind of message out before competitors, if that's kind of what your kind of thing is. But as long as it doesn't kind of hinder or add to the detriment of timing. Because obviously we know that Fridays and Saturday afternoons are not probably the best times to post things. So wait until there's a more opportune moment, kind of later on or earlier on in the week.
Okay. Well, life is all about timing anyways, right? So why would a campaign be any different?
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of campaigns, because you have over 10 years of experience leading campaigns for major brands, could you zoom into a few campaigns that just really stood out?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. I've worked on some huge campaigns with brands like Sky and Adidas. I've been lucky enough to work on some, well, not lucky enough, but I guess fortunate in the end, to work on some campaigns that have won awards. So there was a campaign for MacArthur Glen that we ran in 2016, who are a kind of fashion outlet all over the UK. And that won a Newsworks award because it was aligned with Fashion Week, and it was a really quick and agile turnaround. And yeah, I'm really proud that that campaign itself won an award. A campaign we ran for Adidas earlier this year, or launched earlier this year at Hypebeast, that has just been put up for an award this week. I think it's just won an award this week at a Berlin kind of festival. So when those campaigns win awards, that's it's a really gratifying thing that work you kind of put in, or were part of that team making that happen, that came to life and was recognised for it. But my favourite campaign was one that we did for Sky in 2017 for Game of Thrones. So it was the last Game of Thrones series that when that launched, Sky wanted to do just a big stunt, basically a big marketing stunt to land the announcement of Game of Thrones. And it was kind of, it went out on the day that final series started on Sky. And we were talking about all sorts of ideas, but the main thing that we kind of were landing on was turning the cover of the Evening Standard into ice, but not actual ice, but, looking like ice, right? So we had this idea of a kind of, I guess, a see-through cover wrap, which looked and felt and communicated that kind of icy messaging, winter is here and all that sort of stuff. And in itself, that is just a bit of paper technology. It's a marketing stunt, and it probably doesn't sound that sexy or that kind of developed in terms of a campaign idea. But the reason I find so much satisfaction, or I think of it as my favorite campaign, is because it came at a time when content was, I guess, king, and the Evening Standard was set up to create amazing content for brands. And they wanted to do this paper tech execution, but there weren't really any people in the building that had that expertise anymore. Maybe 10 years ago there were, but it came at a time when that sort of execution wasn't in vogue, because the Evening Standard prints 1 million copies a day. The production cost of doing anything like that is huge. So brands have stopped doing that sort of execution. So I had to really lead the research and development of that execution. I had to just drive it myself. I worked very closely with our head of design, but it was essentially just me figuring out whether transparent paper or see-through paper over a cover looks good. So I was going over to Sky in Osterley, their head office, with bundles of Evening Standard papers and transparent paper that I'd got from the art shop to show a first mock-up that I'd stapled together to see if that would work. So it was very kind of very old school in that respect. And then I had to move that conversation forward. I had to convince the Evening Standard business, that this was going to happen, and we should put some investment into having some test shots to test issues printed. So that was obviously another thing that we had to I had to convince the business to pay for. So, and the campaign hadn't signed off by this point. So it's just a lot of back and forth for something that should have been relatively easy. But then Sky did it, they signed it off, they're absolutely so happy with the campaign. And then the satisfaction of seeing that paper land kind of in the street and people kind of picking it up. There was a funny moment when I went down to the platform at High Street Kensington. I was about to get the tube over to Sky with the first copies of the paper from that day. The furore of the campaign, I was going between place to place to kind of to align with all the marketing things that we had going on. I remember seeing someone reading the paper, looking at the cover wrap, ripping the cover wrap off, and then just looking back at the paper again. I was kind of sat there thinking that's months of work. But it just goes to show advertising isn't for everyone. And at the end of the day, it is just advertising. And sometimes you can't please everyone. But that was just a funny kind of way, the guy ripped the cover up off the paper. But on the whole, the campaign was very well received. The brand loved it. It really landed at a perfect time and kind of put me kind of on the map in the company. So yeah, that was my favorite execution, an old school paper tech print execution, which seems mad when I'm now going into a world of influencers and social first content. The paper tech campaign was my favorite of the last 10 years.
So interesting. Such a great example. I would have picked up that plastic paper and I stapled it back. Like, no, hold on. This took me months.
Giving it back to him.
Let me staple it back. Yeah. Josh, in your former response, you said that back in 2017, content was king. Is content no longer king in 2020?
No, content is still king. Yeah, for sure. No, I didn't mean that content is no longer king. Content is still king, but I think there are new supporting kings to it. Cadence is really important. The cadence and delivery and frequency of content is now as important as the actual content itself, and speed. Getting things out in lots of frequency and lots of speed.
Okay. Well, I'm going to throw my final curveball at you before we move into your recommendations. Josh, if you could do anything in this world, would it still be marketing?
Oh, if I could do anything, I would be on a stage at Glastonbury with a guitar playing to 500,000 people.
Okay.
If I could do anything. But, such is life. Maybe another life.
Okay, so you go from managing influencers to being one of the influencers yourself.
Oh, I'd be the influencer. Yeah, I would be one of the most famous people on the planet. I mean, if you're asking me if I would do anything differently, if I had the option of, if I had an end goal in sight, lead singer with the guitar at Glastonbury, headline slot, one of the most famous people in the world. That's the only thing I'd do differently. Get to that.
Love it. Okay, excellent, Josh. Well, moving into our rapid fire set of questions, which are your recommendations for our audience. So my first question would be, who do you admire? Is there a professional role model or an influencer that just really inspires you?
Okay, so the first ones that I'd like to call out might be cheating a little bit, but it's the artist that I work with. I meet one of the tattooists, Jack Watts, at his studio in Sang Blue when he's tattooing, and just after a coffee or kind of a little bit of conversation with him, I've got 100 ideas of how we can kind of work together and harness his potential for brands. Or similarly, I'm catching up with the graffiti artist who's doing a mural, and again, I'm coming away with so many ideas just from that short conversation or that short meeting. So the artists that I work with, check them all out. They're at lawlessstudio.co.uk/agency. They are my inspiration, number one at the minute. But in terms of other inspirations, there's a guy called Mike Winnett who he's a bit of a personality, shall we say, on LinkedIn. He has a video series called The Entrepreneur, where he calls out kind of big motivational speakers and pokes holes in their sort of offerings. And he is just genius. He's brilliant. He's fantastic. Definitely go and check him out. Benjamin Dennehy, he's a no-nonsense sales trainer, says a lot of things that kind of people possibly don't like, but he has built an amazing career from basically telling businesses how the sales process should work. But his videos are amazing. He's a brilliant influence on LinkedIn. I definitely recommend him. A guy called Dan Kelsall and his team at Offended Marketing. They talk really honestly and openly about the way they work with brands. They're not for everyone. They're quite, out there and a bit outspoken, but they also really talk openly about male mental health and mental health in kind of media. In an industry that can be quite cutthroat and high pressured, they are really outspoken about supporting men and generating mental health awareness. So definitely check them out. And also lastly, a couple of guys called Adam and David who run the Creative Rebels podcast. They're great. It's kind of like a motivational podcast, but it's with kind of, I guess, YouTube influencers, people that have ditched the 9 to 5 and followed their creative passion. And each of their episodes is around, following your creative passion and kind of, making business and making kind of a career from it. So yeah, check out the Creative Rebels podcast. They are amazing.
So interesting. I'm gonna have to tune into their podcast as well. And Josh, you have a tattoo going on, right, on your arm?
Yes, yeah, I've got a few. I wouldn't be. How can I represent artists if I'm not? I don't have tattoos myself. This is a guy who I'm just bringing on now. A guy called Patrick Hilton. He's based in Poland. Check him out. He's got about 70,000 followers on Instagram. He's got an amazing graphic, really playful, bright color sort of style to his work. So check him out, Patrick Hilton.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, what about a book, a group, a publication, an event, or a community that you'd like to recommend?
In terms of publication, I've tried to stay away. I read quite a lot of the news and listen, read The Guardian and tune into The Independent, where I used to work at ESI, but I've tried to stay away from news for the last 6 months or so because news is generally pretty bad. But a publication I really like to call out a guy's called The Book of Man. So The Book of Man is essentially a men's lifestyle digital magazine. it was started by a guy called Martin Robinson, and he used to be at Shortlist. So Shortlist closed. It used to be quite a successful magazine handed out here in the UK. And everything around the Book of Man is around male mental health. It's kind of like an empowering sort of male focused lifestyle website, but with a skew towards kind of mental health and raising awareness around mental health issues. So check out the Book of Man. Love those guys. Love everything that they're doing. In terms of a book, I just had this delivered, Steal Like an Artist. That's just come through. I can't remember the recommendation. I think I found it on LinkedIn, but already I'm kind of flicking through, and this will be, not saying that I am an artist, but obviously work with artists and I try and harness creativity in as many ways as possible. So Steal Like an Artist. I haven't read it yet, but it's already going to be good. And in terms of hashtags, there's so many hashtags, I don't even know where to start. But on Instagram, my favorite at the minute is accidentally Wes Anderson. So basically any bit of architecture or any kind of place in the world that looks a bit like it should be from a Wes Anderson film. Pastel colours, kind of, a lot of places in Jaipur in India look like they could be on the set of a Wes Anderson film. So this hashtag basically is for people to put up photos of random hotels and kind of random architecture across the world that look like they could be in a Wes Anderson set. It's just a really playful caption, hashtag, sorry, that you never would have expected. Yeah. So follow that hashtag. It's fun.
Okay, excellent. And last but not least, Josh, what's your favorite app or tool at the moment?
There's two. LinkedIn,
okay,
which is really boring, but it's a really. I think there's not enough organic content on LinkedIn. I go on LinkedIn and then I'm scrolling down, and then not after a while, there's posts from yesterday, posts from last week. I don't know whether it's the algorithm, but I think there's such a lack of organic content on there. So I try and put slides up around Lawless Studio as much as I can. I put new artist announcements on LinkedIn as much as I can to kind of communicate with my wider network. So LinkedIn is really valuable, and it's probably my most used tool at the minute. My other most used app is an app called The Athletic. So that is it's a sports app. It's a sports content app. It's almost like a sports newspaper, but they really invested heavily about a year or so ago in some of the best football writers on the planet. So there's so many amazing football writers on that app, and the content is really good. And someone recommended it to me. People keep saying, "Oh, have you tried The Athletic?" I'm like, "No, I'll get round to it." And signed up to it. I think it's quite a small subscription model, a few pounds a month or something. And the content is amazing. So that is kind of what's taking my attention right now: LinkedIn and The Athletic.
I actually just interviewed their EMEA marketing director. So stay tuned for a podcast with The Athletic very soon.
Wow, how timely.
Okay, Josh. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the Content Mix. It was awesome to meet you. I can't wait to see what you do with Lawless Studio. And let's keep in contact.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Carlota, and thank you everyone for listening. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Go and visit lawlessstudio.co.uk/agency. And looking forward to talking to you guys again.
Me too. And to everybody listening in today, thank you for joining us on the Content Mix. For more perspectives on the content marketing industry in Europe, check out the Content Mix. We'll be releasing interviews just like this one every day. So keep on tuning in. Thanks again. Have a fabulous day and see you next time. Bye.